Hi everyone, welcome to Annie's Art Book Studio. With Valentine's Day approaching, I am sure that a lot of you are wondering, what can I give my favorite person in the world for this holiday and not spend a ton of money? And I have the perfect gift for you. Well, this little jar contains notes that I have been writing since, I think, September. Every time that my favorite person in the world did something nice, I wrote it in a note and I put it in this jar. So I have a ton of little tiny notes, cute things that I wanted to say to him, or nice things that he did for me that made me feel good. And I decorated a very ordinary jar and made it look pretty with a little bow and a little bit of Mod Podge. I will show you in just a little bit how to do this. So the things that you are going to need, of course you will need a jar. You need a jar that doesn't have any stickers on it. I mean, of course, if you get one from the store, you can always clean it up. The best way to do that is using a hair dryer and just lift the stickers and wash the jar and you get this. This is basically a Tostitos jar, as you can see. Chunky salsa mild. Anyway, you would need a pair of scissors. You would need a jar of Mod Podge. I prefer to use for this project the matte one with a matte finish. However, you can use a glossy one if that's what you prefer. You will need some kind of perfume because obviously when you put the notes in the jar, there still might be some residue smell in it. So you might want to spray your notes with a little bit of perfume. You would need a cutter for the little shapes that you're going to put on the jar, or you can cut them by hand. You would need colored paper, any kind of leftovers would do, and you would either need a ribbon or a little bit of tulle for the jar's lid. So let's begin. I would like to point out that the best choice of paper is one that is thinner because it will be easier to work with a Mod Podge with. And of course, you're going to make a couple of shapes and use them later for your jar. The first thing that you have to do, you have to make sure that your jar is completely dry. Get your Mod Podge. Maybe you need somebody to help you out to actually open it because it sticks very hard. Okay, we're back. Me versus a jar of Mod Podge 1-0. I had help to open it because sometimes it sticks so hard, it's really difficult to open. The best way to do that when it happens is to heat the lid a little bit. That's going to help you out to open it. In any case, you would like to start with covering the whole jar with Mod Podge. Don't worry that it's a little bit white. That's not going to show later. Now what I like to do is I put my whole hand in the jar and kind of hold it from underneath so there's no fingerprints all over it. So I'm going to cover the whole jar very quickly. It doesn't matter if you can see the strokes or not because everything is going to dry completely clear afterwards. Then I am taking the shapes that I want to use, stick them. I know that they're not sticking very well right now, but you can just spread them around and I will show you how they're going to stick completely a little bit later. So what I like to do is get the different kinds of paper and spread them around so they don't repeat. I also alternate the way that they point. So now, as you can see, they're not sticking completely to the jar. I will get a tiny bit of Mod Podge and go over the paper and seal it to the jar. That is basically how you're going to make it stick and make it look like it's part of the jar eventually when it dries. You can use any kind of embellishments. You can use, if you have little beads or anything else that you want to put, like sparkles or anything else, pretty much everything that you think might be looking good on it. And sometimes I like to overlap some of the hearts to use different kinds of paper and kind of have them overlap like this. I think it looks nicer. Getting some Mod Podge and going over them again. And now we're going to take a little break. Let this dry for a little bit and I will show you what will happen next. Now when you're waiting for your jar to dry, you might be working on your lid. First of all, you can always leave it like this and cover just with tissue paper and afterwards tie with a string. However, to make sure that your loved one can't see the Tostitos on top, you might decide to use some hot glue to glue your tissue paper to the lid. As you can see, I'm using it generously all over. And I have 2 layers of tissue paper. I will explain why in just a second. So press firmly. As you can see, you can still see part of the Tostitos through the tissue paper. That's why we have 2 layers. But instead of using hot glue on the second one as well, I will use a little bit of Mod Podge. I'm not going over the sides, just the top. And I will set it aside to dry. Now in your jar, you can always use, as I mentioned, a ton of embellishments. For example, I have these very cute buttons that I have been saving for a while. I have different sizes hearts, and I think I'm going to use a couple now. Because these are a little bit bulkier than paper, I would use hot glue to glue them initially to the jar. And I would press firmly, like this. Let's see. Because this is a small jar, I'm not going to use the very big buttons. And after the hot glue is completely cold, you can go over all of these hearts with a little bit of Mod Podge just to seal them on top. That will make it more sturdy in case you want to use it for something else in the future. There we go. Here's our last one. You remember that I mentioned using a perfume, correct? So before your jar is completely dry, you can spray a couple of sprays of perfume inside just to make sure that there's no residue smell. Leave it to dry and then you can put your notes inside. And now we're gonna wait for a little bit. Oh, actually I was gonna show you how to use a little bit of sparkling glue to outline some of your hearts and also let it dry. That is giving it a really cute look in the end when it's dry. Be generous with the sparkling glue. It dries flat, so you can always, you don't have to do all of the hearts, of course. You can do just some of them, which is what I'm going to do. So there is a variety of different ones. And then I'm going to leave it to dry. And we're back now. Our jar is completely dry at this point. We can use it to either put our notes inside. We can put electric little candles with batteries, or we can put a regular candle. Of course, you have to have in mind that if you're using a real candle, you have to leave the jar open. This is what I'm going to do to show you how interesting it looks once it's lit. And you can also glue your candle to the jar, but this is pretty much what it is. Of course, there is also an option for you to use the wrap with the little bow. And this is how your completed jar is going to look like. Happy Valentine's Day!